Hey Yoshi players, and I realize it's been like forever since I've done any sort of new video. Yeah, I know I posted a new Super Mario Adventures episode a couple days ago, but in terms of how everything else has been going, I have not posted a lot of videos. 2015 was unfortunately not a good year for me to end on. I will say it was a big year for me, but it wasn't really the time for me to end it. My laptop was in very big repairs, and so I wasn't able to do like a New Year's special, or I couldn't even get the Christmas episode of Sticks done. But all I want to say is that 2015 has been a great year. Thank you all for supporting me, and here we are now in 2016. We've come so far. And yet today, we finally come to the conclusion of the Pac-Man World Trilogy review. We conclude with Pac-Man World 3. Pac-Man World 3, the last Pac-Man World game to ever be developed, was released almost 11 years ago. And unlike the first two games, it was actually developed by a different development studio. While the first two games were developed by Namco, and developed by a different studio for the Game Boy Advance titles, this game was actually developed alongside with Blitz Games. They have been known for a couple of decent and bad games, and so when I heard they were making this new game, I was a little bit skeptical. But ironically, when the game came out, I decided to give it a chance, and to my surprise, it was actually a lot different than the first two Pac-Man World games. And as most of you know, difference can sometimes be a cool thing. Though the differences in this game pay off, well, let's take a look at the story. On his 25th birthday, Pac-Man is teleported away from Pac-Lands and is transported into a landfill pit for a while. After he makes his escape, he decides that he has to join forces with the ghosts because an evil tyrant named Irwin wants to take over both the Pac-Man world and the Spectral realm where the ghosts were born. With no time to waste, Pac-Man must embark once again on his last journey in the Pac-Man World trilogy to save the world once more. If there is one thing I can actually say is that the plot to this game is fairly simple, and the villain's diabolical plan is actually a lot better than the other two games. Whereas in the first game, Pac-Man just wanted to get all the attention and thought he was the real Pac-Man, and in the second game, Spooky only wanted to collect the golden fruit just so he could kill all the Pac people. Although here, Irwin is basically trying to take over both the Pac-Lands and the Spectral realm, two different worlds destroyed. So, because of that diabolical plan, I wouldn't necessarily say that Irwin himself is a good villain. I mean, just look at his design. He doesn't look very interesting. And on top of that, he's nowhere near as good as villains like Pac-Man and Spooky. He's just a little bit too cliched for my taste, and I didn't have that many enjoyment from him. So the story's good, but we start off with a pretty bad villain, so how does the gameplay stand out? Well, as I said before, this game is a lot different from the first two Pac-Man World games. Whereas the first two Pac-Man World games were more focused on platforming, this one is more focused on beating up enemies. And at times this can be challenging, but I'm gonna say, for the most part, the combat in this game is just boring. As I said, it can get challenging and maybe sometimes fun in the later levels, but in the first few levels and the majority of the game, it's just very boring. You just button mash the same button over and over again until these enemies die, and some require different strategies to beat them, but you don't have to use those different strategies to kill them. Like there's enemies with spikes on their heads, but apparently punching is the most powerful attack that Pac-Man can use. So what's the point of that? I know butt bouncing is kind of used to dodge the enemy's attacks, especially those freaking robots that shoot lasers at you, but still, it's not really that interesting and challenging to defeat all these enemies. And because of that little thing, platforming is very minimum in this game. It does still show up every now and then, and when it does, it's probably the most funnest thing about the game. Although when it disappears, I really wish it would come back. They're often interrupted by more combat sequences, and here comes another problem, another combat sequence with the game. Spectral Monsters. You know, since you're teaming up with ghosts, you instead fight a group known as Spectral Monsters. These sections play out just how you would expect from a Pac-Man World game. You have to eat the power pellets, you have to eat them, and make sure they're all wiped out so you can move on, yada Unfortunately, very much like the combat sequences, these sections are boring. They're very repetitive and they come up almost way too often, especially in the Spectral World stages, where they come up almost every 5 minutes. Why can't you just keep it to the platforming? I would have really appreciated that more. Like before, I do think it can get a little bit challenging later on, but not much, and especially compared to the combat sequences. Also, one big addition, the characters can now actually talk. Okay, I know they could talk in the original games, but I mean every character can talk. Pac-Man himself now has a voice. And speaking of which, Pac-Man's personality seems to have changed a little bit, almost to the point where he's kind of acting like an adult. I mean, he sure does sound like an adult, and I know that Pac-Man has had childlike personalities before, but here it really seems like that Pac-Man is starting to become a bit of an adult, which I don't know if is a good thing, because at times Pac-Man can sound pretty annoying. Like, there's a few times where he's sounding mean-spirited and often trying to get things done, and granted he is still the Pac-Man who wants to help people out and save the world, but still at times I do think this is a bit distracting. Though to be honest, that's just a nitpick. How's the music? Well, it's alright. It's not good, it's not bad, it's just alright. Why is that? Well, I guess it's because the soundtrack in this game isn't as very upbeat and very energetic as the first two soundtracks, instead goes for a more dark and eerie soundtrack, which isn't such a bad thing. Most of the time the music is good to listen to, and other times it can get a little bit distracting, especially in the levels where the music doesn't fit the scenario that's going on. With that being said though, the soundtrack itself is still alright, because there are some tracks I like and there's also some tracks I don't like. There are a lot of tracks I really enjoy, like the ones in the Spectral World stages, and to be honest, I even like the intro music. Like, listen to this for a minute. I know it's different, but to be honest, it sounds kinda smooth for my taste. And of course, since it's, again, a Pac-Man World game, power pellets and dots are everywhere, although unfortunately they don't really add up to everything. All they give you is a high score. There's no reward for trying to collect all of the Pac dots in the levels. Yeah, there are fruit to collect, but they don't really reward you anything. All they get you are Pac-Man cards, and I guess if you're really some kind of geek, you would want to go after them, but to be honest, they're just a waste of your time. Although there are a lot of things in this game I also like as well. For example, if you collect these Gallagher little icons, they actually transport you to an exact Pac-Man maze, almost like as if you're playing the original Pac-Man. It's kind of like the first game, except you can actually see the entire maze, and there's power-ups everywhere, and you have to eat the ghost, and there's this stupid thing that shows up and adds more Pac dots. You know, it kind of reminds me a lot of Pac-Man Arrangement for the arcade version. Also, I also like the little museum that they give this game as well. Remember that little tutorial video where Toru Iwatani gives you a history of the Pac-Man franchise? There are actually a lot of things I didn't know about that I found out in that video. A very nice addition. And of course, I also like how you get to play the original Pac-Man without having to do anything. So to be honest, this game does have highlights, but it's also got a few negatives, so I'm not exactly sure what to rate this game. Well, for me, Pac-Man World 3 is okay. It's not good, but it's also not bad. It's just average. I know there are some people that like this game, and I also know there's a lot of people that hate this game, but to me, I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. Pac-Man World 3 does a lot of differences. Some of them can pay off, but I think the others are just very boring, especially for a sequel to an already successful series. I may have some things to like about this game, but to be honest, the things I don't like really do stick out, and that's why I can only say that Pac-Man World 3 is just an average game. It's not bad, it's just nothing special. If you like this game though, that's great. If you love it, then keep on liking it, I won't make fun of you. Although for me, I just think this is the least of the Pac-Man World trilogy. And with that out of the way, we finally tackled all 3 Pac-Man World games. Which one was my favorite? Well, let's go from best to worst. I think the best game of the trilogy was Pac-Man World 2. Great levels, great design, great music, and it's just a really fun game. Not the best game in the world, but still, for a Pac-Man game, it's fun. And a good runner-up is the first Pac-Man World game, because it's very much like a 2.5D platformer with very catchy music here and there, and it's just got a lot of really fun platforming sections and a lot of things that pays homage to the original Pac-Man series. And last but unfortunately least is Pac-Man World 3. Like I said, not a bad game, it's just nothing spectacular. So, I finally finished off the Pac-Man World Trilogy reviews. What's next? Well, in case some of you forgot, I actually did a poll a couple months ago. I personally would like to thank everybody for voting in that poll, and it appears as though we have a winner. And the winner of that poll is going to be the next thing I review. Thank you all for your votes, and most importantly, thanks for watching this video, guys. Have a great day, and it's sure good to be back. Thanks for supporting me, and take care.